Hi guys, it's Rabbi Chastain. I hope you're doing well. I heard you learned the infamous chapter 24. So I wanted to speak with you a little bit about it. Don't worry, we'll make sense of it. I just wanted to give you a little bit more of a Torah perspective. You've learned a lot of new things, and it's interesting to take a look at how we view those things. And we'll take a look at that through our class today. But one of the specific things I wanted to talk about is the cosmology question. The cosmology is how the universe came into being. We're going to talk about, of course, we already know what the Torah tells us as a fact, but we want to look at what science has put together over the generations and see, is that something that works along with the Torah? As we already spoke out a couple of minutes ago, of course, the Ribono Shel Olam doesn't need to answer to science, as science is consistently developing its opinion and it changes every once in a while. But does what they say right now work with the Torah? So let's take a look. It's interesting. So this class that I'm about to give right now, and this isn't the entire class, I'll just speak for a few minutes about this idea, this first cosmology question, was a class that I gave years ago. It was probably 2011 to my youth group in Portland, Oregon. And it was a lot of fun. Hopefully you'll enjoy it also. So we're going to talk about looking at the Ribono Shel Olam from the beginning of the universe and from looking at outer space, really. I gave a whole sheer series on outer space. I even gave one on could there be aliens, but that's for a different time. It's fun. All right, so we're going to take you way back to 1913, right? That's over 100 years ago. And we're at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, in the southwest United States. And there was a young scientist named Vesto Slipher. I don't know if you say it Slipher or Slipher, but Vesto, we'll call him Vesto, scientist Vesto. And he was called upon to study a very strange glow in the sky that they saw from the observatory. And they thought it was a new galaxy. And he came and he researched them and he found a group of distant stars. And that group of distant stars was going to be called Andromeda. That's what they're going to name it. And he looked at Andromeda for the telltale sign of a new galaxy. There's rotation. You see rotation in the stars, but he didn't find it. But as he researched, he found that it was rocketing away from the Earth at 700,000 miles per hour. That means it was just shooting out into space. And if you think about that, that means that something had to send it on a course shooting out into space. Some energy at some point in history had to send it shooting out into space. Where did the energy come from? What was that energy? So let's talk about that. And they checked all the other surrounding galaxies when they found out this amazing discovery. And they found that all of the galaxies that they studied were moving away from the Earth at more than Mach speed. They were all shooting out away from the Earth. And by 1925, he'd identified 42 galaxies like that were just shooting away from the Earth at tremendous speeds. So everyone that they looked at, this was happening with. Let's go to 1916. We're 3 years later now. Now we're in Germany, and we're with a Jewish scientist. Not a frum one, but a Jewish one. In fact, one that really fought Frumkeit in a big way. And even when he was proved that certain things probably weren't the way he thought, he had a hard time swallowing it. He said a couple of times that it bothered him. And his name is Albert Einstein. Brilliant man, very brilliant man. And he formulated the theory of general relativity in 1916 and received praise from all over the scientific community for that. And his calculations caused a few problems, a few technical dilemmas, mathematical snags, but nothing that really bothered him because he felt like he had really figured out a lot of how the world worked. At the same time, there's a Danish mathematician and a friend of Einstein named William de Sitter. And he found those issues and he explained them to Einstein. And general relativity could only work if the universe was exploding outward in all directions from a central point. So if Einstein's research was right, then Einstein's research pointed towards what we'll call a Big Bang, right? You've heard that Lashon before. A Big Bang, something that was at the center of it all, that created it all, and that sent it all rocketing into space. That's an idea here. It was sent rocketing into space. In 1922, we're going further in time, there was a Soviet mathematician named Alexander Friedman, and he saw the exact same thing. And none of them knew Vesto Slipher, or Slipher, at the time because of World War I, and nobody was in touch with each other. And at the end of the war, they all sat down together with Einstein to share their findings, and he resisted their solutions because he realized their theological implications. It means he realized that they pointed to probably God, which we'll discuss. And he said, they're suspicious. I have not yet fallen into the hands of priests. That was his Lashon. I haven't fallen into the hands of priests and rabbis. The circumstance of an expanding universe irritates me. That's a scientist admitting that the things that he found irritated him. And it happens to be many make those types of admissions, and some of them withhold research that bothers them, right? So he said, an expanding universe around a Big Bang, that bothers me because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in the Ribono Shel Olam. And this is kind of pushing me a little bit towards him, and that makes me feel uncomfortable, right? So before Einstein, there were 3 acceptable descriptions for the universe. There is the idea of a static universe. That means that matter is standing still in space with minimal movement, but just sliding across the emptiness of space. And it could have been created by Hashem, or it could have, Chas v'shalom, existed forever without him in that way. Then there's an idea of an expanding and contracting universe, also called an oscillating universe. And there's a Big Bang that sends it all exploding outward, and then it all comes crashing back together and explodes again ad infinitum, just keeps doing that. Comes in, splashes back out. Gravity pulls it back in, it hits itself, and the hitting itself causes an explosion, poof, pops back out. If that happens forever, though, it gets weaker each time. And eventually, all of existence comes crashing back in on itself, and it's over. You also still have to figure out what caused the initial bang. That you could still say may have been created by the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, then you had the expanding universe theory. And this is the one that seems to make the most sense. It's also the one that seems to correlate with the Ribono Shel Olam the best. So the expanding universe theory is that there was a Big Bang that sent the universe expanding outwards, and the force of the initial explosion could not be reversed by the gravitational pull of the matter in space. It's going to go out like that because whatever set it off was powerful enough to just send it off continuously expanding in space over a gajillion years, but expanding in space, and it will be doing that, right? Not saying that the Earth is a bajillion years old, just saying that from the explosion until whenever it would be over would be however the Ribono Shel Olam would let it run. And the expanding universe theory is a theory that really points to the Ribono Shel Olam. And the model poses a real question of where did it come from? And that was very hard for many scientists who didn't want to say that for them, it'd be very bothersome with their scientific calculations that there was something that they couldn't really calculate or control that set it all off, that being the Ribono Shel Olam. All right, so the expanding universe theory pointed to a supernatural creator, and Einstein saw that, and he grew uncomfortable that science and religion were growing way too close. Now let's go to 1925. There's a man named Edwin Hubble in California. And using the Hubble telescope, he dealt the static model a fatal blow. The idea that we're just in space, there was no Big Bang, we just float around forever. He showed that all galaxies within 100 million light years of Earth were receding. They were all going further into space. And Einstein refused to believe it until Hubble brought him to California to see it for himself. And Einstein died in 1955, swayed but not convinced. He was never convinced of an expanding universe. He wouldn't let it die because it bothered him. In 1965, let's shoot forward 10 years, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, who I ask their mechila if I said their names wrong, were calibrating super-sensitive microwave detectors for Bell Telephone Labs. When I grew up, we had a phone service called Bell South because I lived in Atlanta in the South. So Bell Telephone Labs has been around for a long time. I guess that makes me sound old. But yeah, I guess I'm getting old. Fine. So there was that was all bought by AT&T at a certain point, just so you know the history there. All right. So they were working for Bell Labs on a microwave detector. And no matter where they aimed their instrument, they were picking up the same background noise, a 3-degree Kelvin hum. The universe was humming at them at 3 degrees Kelvin. And they thought their instruments must be broken. So they tried a lot of different ways to fix it, and they were looking at all the mechanical things that could be going wrong. But everything they tried, even when they built new ones, nope, they always heard that hum. And they researched it, and they realized that that hum wasn't from around here. It was coming from beyond our atmosphere, from beyond our solar system, from every detectable corner of the universe. And that, my friends, was the hum of the Big Bang. That was the hum of the Big Bang. They found that Alexander Friedman had predicted that the remnants of the Big Bang should be detectable in the form of weak microwave radiation around, let's say, 3 degrees Kelvin. And they got a Nobel Prize for discovering that part of the Big Bang. So the scientific world broke into panic, trying to see if it all matched up. And the hot temperature of the Big Bang should have left the universe with 75% hydrogen, 25% helium, and 1 part in a million of everything else. And they checked it. And yep, that's what you find. But okay, hold on. It could have exploded many times. We don't need to say the G word yet to say, God, how can we prove it? Well, we can find the average density of the universe, and depending on the matter of the universe, we can see if there would be enough force and gravity to pull it all back together, making a big crunch. And we can say that there's still the oscillating universe, and maybe it just does it on its own. That research went on from 1965 to 1978. In 1978, Dr. Robert Jastrow of NASA announced research confirming that even counting matter and radiation, gas, black holes, and invisible matter, the universe wouldn't come close to being able to make a big crunch and pull everything back together. Gravity ain't that strong. Can't do it. Dr. James Trifle and John Barrow and Frank Tipler all confirmed those findings in the 1980s. Can't be that it happened. It exploded, but there's not enough energy in the universe, in the galaxies, without the Rabbi Shalom to do it, to pull it back in. Without him, that type of thing wouldn't happen with the energy that's there. Hopefully you won't do that, because I don't really want to experience a big crunch. I think it would hurt. In 1988, Dr. Stephen Hawking, you may have seen him. He was in a wheelchair and was pretty much, he couldn't really move. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of him. He said that many people don't like the idea that time has a beginning, that it began around a Big Bang at a certain time, because time having a beginning smacks of divine intervention. It sounds like Hashem. But present evidence suggests that the universe will probably expand forever. And in 1990, John Mather of NASA at a meeting presented all of this data and dramatic support for the expanding universe theory, and he was met with thunderous applause. And the chairman of the meeting exclaimed, "It seems clear that the audience is in favor of the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit." That was a bunch of scientists clapping, at least the first verse or so, which seems to have been confirmed. That was his lesson. And if the missing matter turns up tomorrow, okay, said Professor Stanley Jackie of Edinburgh, we still know that sometime it exploded for the first time, and we must explain what force brought the universe into existence. And that, for many people, give them permission to believe in the Rabbi Shalom. That's an interesting little look at the Big Bang and the beginning of cosmology. Let's talk about the age of the Earth next. All right, here we go.